Welcome to our weekly show for the National Association of Independent Medical Practices. You can find us at naimp.org. NAIMP is an organization focused on helping independent medical practices become more successful by providing innovative discussions, networking with like-minded professionals, and opportunities for growth, education, and increased revenue. Check out our website today at naimp.org.
Hello, this is Shirley Cress-Dudley, your host, and it's a pleasure today to introduce Dana T. as our guest speaker. Dana is the marketing manager of DICOM Grid, a health IT company dedicated to making medical imaging data accessible and affordable to all providers and practices. Their solutions have been named the #1 medical information solution by the Software Information Industry Association and a category leader in this year's KLAS Research Software and Services Report. Dana writes on the topics of imaging strategy and health IT, and her work has been featured in countless publications such as Becker's Hospital Review, High Tech Answers, and Kevin MD. And we're very happy to have her here today. Today's topic is managing medical images in the cloud. Now, Dana, tell us a little bit more about what we're going to go over today.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Shirley. I'm really happy to be speaking here today. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to be talking about when, as a small practice, you should be considering the cloud. I'm going to talk to you about the medical imaging landscape and where we kind of stand as an industry. Then we'll talk about the specific challenges that you need to address as a private practice. We'll take a deep dive into the WAVE philosophy, which is my philosophy on medical image management. I'll introduce you to the cloud, some of the benefits there, and then we'll make a case for software as a service delivery models. And then we'll just close out with some use cases and shed some light on how practices are using the cloud in their daily operations. So if that sounds like a plan, let's get right into it.
Yeah, it sounds great. So when should we start thinking about cloud solutions?
So that's a great question. One of the most important decisions that any image-intensive practice needs to make is what type of image management solution they should go with. In the past, your options were somewhat limited in the sense that you really had to go with an on-premise solution, where you're investing in hardware and software, and it's being built out in-house. So as many folks listening in, they might be familiar with the term PACS, which stands for Picture Archiving and Communication System. So really, whenever you're thinking about purchasing a new PACS or replacing your PACS, that's when you want to start to think about the cloud as an alternative. So at this point in time, your practice might fall into one of 4 buckets. The first bucket here is you need a new PACS. So maybe you're a new practice, you're looking to invest in your very first image management solution. Perhaps you're a more established practice and you've already made the investment in a PACS in the past, but you're just not getting the functionality that you were hoping for, and so you're now exploring other options. That's another scenario you might find yourself in. The third bucket is maybe you have a PACS and you've been happy with the functionality that you have, but now you're looking for a solution to back up all your data. So as part of a disaster recovery plan for business continuity, you're starting to think about exploring the cloud. And then lastly, you have a PACS, but it's just missing some essential functionality in terms of maybe you're looking to do electronic image sharing, maybe you're looking for an affordable archive. So whatever situation you fall into, these are all a good time to start considering the marketplace and looking at vendors.
So when we look at what's going on in healthcare and especially across the imaging landscape, tell us, why is this an important and timely topic for all the practices listening on this call?
Yeah, so just stepping back and looking at the big picture, imaging is being impacted by a number of changing technology and regulations. With the rise of HIEs and ACOs, we're entering this era of healthcare that really is more connected. It's more connected than it's ever been. patients and providers, they're seeking ways to exchange information at a much faster and more efficient rate. And in order to keep up with the marketplace, you've got to get a handle on this. When it comes to imaging, this is also true. So consider image sharing, which is a key component of image management. It's been in the spotlight a lot recently. And having an agile framework is becoming both a regulatory and a practical requirement in order to compete in the new marketplace.
So when you say changing technology and regulations, what types are you referring to?
So if you look at healthcare and perhaps the solutions that you currently have in your own practice, or maybe the solutions that are on your wish list, if you consider them as all different puzzle pieces and you're trying to put together all the puzzle pieces to create one big puzzle. So maybe you have an EMR for practice management, maybe you have a RIS for scheduling, perhaps you've invested in some imaging modalities, and then some really cutting-edge practices are even starting to explore patient portals. They're getting looped in with regional health information exchanges. It can be hard to bring together all of these puzzle pieces, and that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of imaging, how you can create this nice framework around image management and start to tie everything together.
Well, in terms of the challenges that are specific to our independent practices listening today, what can cloud-based image management or cloud PACS help to overcome? What are the business challenges?
So that's a great question, and that's a great place to kick off the conversation. The first challenge for independent or private practices is cost. Of course, for any size organization, cost is always going to be front and center, but even more so for a smaller specialty practice. There's just not a lot of wiggle room or flexibility. So any technology investment you make, it's got to be a good one. Also, in terms of complexity, you're always striving to reduce complexity. You might be a head surgeon, and if you're a solo practitioner, you're also the IT guy, and you'd be hard-pressed to find any surgeon who wants to be configuring networks and managing hardware and updates. So with cloud solutions, you can help to eliminate some of those barriers in terms of cost and complexity. With traditional PACS implementation, that you have to purchase the hardware up front, you need to go through a process where you roll it out and deploy it, which takes resources, which takes time. And if you're a smaller practice and you're very reliant on imaging for business, you can't have that lag during implementation. So those are some of the specific challenges you might be looking to overcome.
Now, if we go back to the topic of traditional PACS, which you mentioned, what are the limitations that you see with those systems?
Generally speaking, PACS are a closed-loop system, and they operate in what I refer to as a siloed approach to data management. They're not usually designed for collaboration. When they first hit the market, they were really just isolated inside of a radiology department. So just by design, this concept of connected care and being able to exchange data is not traditionally what these types of systems were meant to do. So in fact, just to shed some light on this, I want to talk about a brief poll. I recently posed the question to over 1,000 doctors, IT admins, and physicians about image management. And the question is, what's the most pressing issue you're facing regarding image management? And what we found is that 6 out of 10 of the respondents were having trouble with uploading and ingesting imaging data on CDs into their environment. And also about 5 out of 10 respondents were also having issues with image sharing. So I think these stats capture some of the greater issues that we're seeing here. And these are some of the issues that cloud solution can help to solve.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned cloud management a few times. Can you define cloud management for us and then break it down a bit of what it means to our private practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify what is really meant by cloud image management, I define it as a web-based solution for simplified imaging workflows, archiving, viewing, and exchange. And that's really easy to remember just using the acronym WAVE. W for workflows, A for archiving, V for viewing, and E for exchange. So as Shirley mentioned earlier, I work for a company called DICOM Grid, and I've been working with our customers and my team to develop a nice philosophy around image management. And if you're logging into the webinar and you're able to see the screen, you can see the slides, but if you're just listening in on the podcast, I'm going to walk through it. But it's summed up by this nice graphic here. And the point, the overarching theme is, when it comes to medical imaging, what you're trying to do is provide access to the right image at the right time and the right place to make sure doctors and decision makers can have access to the scans in order to make a diagnosis. So that's the overarching mission. Now, in order to achieve this, you're going to need 4 strategic pillars: workflows, archive, viewing, and exchange. And then to build out this type of program and help to deliver on the mission, you need some foundational pieces, such as software, services, and support.
And I want to second what Dana said, is go to naimp.org if you'd like to look at all of these great slides that she's put together for the presentation. So this is really good information, and I appreciate you continuing to break it down for us.
Absolutely. So starting, we have some animation here. Starting with, getting into the weeds here and starting with workflows. Imaging workflows are really anything that can be automated. Some examples include normalizing patient health information. So say studies are coming in from an outside facility and you need a way to correct the patient's syntax so that it fits with the language that you use at your practice. So that's something that traditionally might be a manual process, but using imaging workflows, you can create automation around this. Another example would be routing. Maybe you refer patients to a local hospital on a regular basis. Using cloud technology, you can set up workflows that push studies directly to DICOM destinations over at that hospital. And vice versa, if you have referring physicians that you communicate with regularly, they can push studies over to you. So just to think of a few other examples here, other examples of workflows include integrations like image enabling your EMR. Perhaps you're a doctor and you work primarily within the electronic medical record, and on occasion you need access to patient exams. There's ways to have the imaging data embedded directly into the patient jacket within your EMR, so you're not jumping between systems constantly. So those are just a few examples for workflows.
Very interesting. And what about archiving?
So archiving is the next topic in our WAVE philosophy, and it's definitely an important topic for independent practices that have a lot of data. It can be expensive to archive, but if you're, say, a women's health practice, you have to do it. It's a requirement. So what the cloud is going to give you is a nice, secure way to store data in a cost-effective manner, and it's also very scalable. So if your practice is growing, you can increase your volume and fluctuate your volume, and that's very simple to do. Basically, you create an online repository, and then you can pull up images from anywhere on a computer. It's searchable. It's almost like email in the sense where you can log in and you can do a query to find a certain patient exam that can date back years and years. So that kind of sums up archiving.
Interesting. And I see the next topic is viewing, and I imagine this is a big one because we need to be able to access data.
Exactly. In terms of medical imaging viewers, a big buzzword these days, I'm a little behind on my slides. Let me just hop over to viewing here. So as I was saying, in terms of viewing, zero footprint, it's a techie term, but it's one that you might hear often, and what it means is 0 downloads and 0 installs. So ultimately, as a physician, you can pull up a study in any browser-based device, such as a computer, a laptop, a desktop. Also, many mobile viewers are optimized for small screens, such as an iPhone or a tablet. So it's a great advantage there.
So if I'm a doctor and I have a patient sitting across from me, can you explain a little bit more about what's going on with my tablet? What am I looking at?
Right, so you're able to pull up that patient study right in front of you. So it's really helpful as a collaborative tool. I think as a patient, you're sitting there and your doctor's pulling up your study, zooming in, making annotations right in front of you. It's hugely valuable. In fact, I know some radiologists that travel with professional sports teams, and they're using this type of technology out on the field when players get hurt. So it's a huge advantage where they can have this type of mobility and pull up the player's imaging and share it out to doctors back at home to have them take a look. It's definitely a nice collaborative tool. So that briefly touches upon viewing. And then moving on to the last pillar of the wave philosophy, exchange. This is another big topic. We briefly talked about it, and we briefly talked about it in the sense that many practices are still using CDs to move studies around. So basically a patient undergoes some imaging, and they're given imaging and it's burned onto a CD, and then they hand carry it to their next destination. Or maybe a referring physician would mail you that CD containing the patient's information. But the bottom line is a lot of practices are still using physical media for information sharing. And this can be slow, it's inefficient, and then it can become quite expensive, especially if you have to overnight a package. And alternatively, what a cloud solution is there to do is it's going to give you a nice and HIPAA-secure environment to move data around in real time. So we're talking like 5 minutes to share 500 megabytes of imaging data. That's a lot of data in a real short time period.
Really is a short amount of time. So to summarize, we just walked through the WAVE philosophy and workflows, archiving, viewing, and exchange. And you explained how all these tools work together to get the right image to the right place at the right time. You mentioned that there's some foundational pieces that help bring these concepts to life. Software, services, support. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So when we look at this chart, these foundational pieces that you just mentioned, software, services, and support. So let's dive into that a little bit. Most cloud solutions are what's called SaaS-based, and SaaS stands for Software as a Service. And it's a software delivery model where the application is centrally managed in a data center and it's provided to users on a subscription base. So what does that mean for private practices? This type of software can be a big advantage for a few reasons. The first is cost, and we talked about why cost is so important with this type of technology. You don't have to go out and buy hardware up front. There's no huge capital expense. Instead, it's an ongoing operational expense, meaning that you pay as you go. It's like any online subscription. You pay as you use it. Now, the topic of SaaS might be new to a few of you on this call, but the ironic thing is you're probably using it in your everyday life. You've just never heard the term. So to provide you with a few examples, maybe you use Gmail for your personal email. That's a great example of a SaaS platform. It's a cloud application, and it's provided as a free software as a service. Dropbox is another great example. Maybe you use that one to store your files and to share them. Again, this is software as a service in action. So different from image management, but helps to paint the picture there. So hand in hand with software is the service aspect. And this is the second big advantage for practices. What the service part implies is that your cloud provider or whatever vendor is hosting your medical images, they're going to be managing the software for you. So you don't have to worry about hardware updates and all that because everything is going to be included. Most software providers or imaging cloud vendors, they're going to update their product on a regular basis, and they're going to roll out new features to you automatically. So again, just to bring back the example of Gmail, if you're a Gmail user, you may notice that once a month you'll log in and you'll notice an update with a new feature or some new bit of functionality that's available to you. So the same applies with your image management platform, where you wake up one day and you log into the system and maybe there's a new tool in the viewer for annotations. So that kind of explains what I mean by services there. So the great thing is you're always going to be running the most up-to-date version of the software.
Okay, that's fascinating. So is this different from traditional on-premise systems and PACS because they often require updating manually, right?
Exactly. So it's definitely a different model. Usually a traditional PACS, they will offer you the ability to upgrade to their next version. Sometimes that's going to involve actually purchasing new hardware and potentially having a representative come out and help you configure the new hardware with the next version or the next license of the software. So it can get expensive because oftentimes you have to pay to roll out that new upgrade and also purchasing hardware. And there's the disadvantage that you're not continuously getting access to new features as they become available. So they're just two different delivery models.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, we're all in healthcare, so when we think about the cloud, then we worry about security. Can you talk a little bit more about how to keep that information secure when it's in the cloud?
Yes, absolutely. So the point of all this is to create a framework to manage and share information online that is HIPAA secure, of course. And this comes into play when the data is moving, so it's being transferred through the web, or it's at rest, meaning it's in storage. And there's a lot of security requirements that go into making this technology HIPAA safe. Some of these include physical security measures at the data center where the information is being stored. And when I say physical security measures, I'm literally talking about, for instance, the keys to get into the data center cages, who has access to those keys, video surveillance, 24/7 guards, all of that kind of physical security measures. Beyond that, there are other virtual safeguards. A big one when it comes to image management is an encryption technology. One of the safest ways to secure imaging in the cloud is using an approach called split merge technology. And that gets pretty technical. You can Google what that means, but essentially, just the Reader's Digest version here, is that it splits the patient identifying information from the actual image study when it's being stored. So what that means is even if any unauthorized personnel were to ever get a hold of the study, they wouldn't know who the study belonged to because there wouldn't be any patient health identifiers associated with it. Now lastly, when you're talking about securing imaging online, you need the right tools to create this secure environment. And a lot of that is going to come down to securing access. So that basically means limiting who has access to the system that you're using to host your images, if that makes sense.
Can you explain a little bit more about the limiting access?
Yes. So let me think about that for 1 second. So maybe you're a practice of 5 physicians and you have some additional support staff, so you're a team of 7. So some of the questions you want to ask yourself are, do we want to give everyone access to the imaging? Do we want everyone to be able to log into our account? So maybe the answer is yes. Maybe you want everyone to be able to log in. But once they're logged in as a user, do you want to give all the users at your practice the same permissions? So for instance, do you want everyone at your office to have the ability to edit PHI? Do you want everyone to have the ability to download, share, or delete studies? Probably not. So you need to have a system where you can create various users and various roles and be able to apply certain permissions on the user level. So that's huge. The other thing is making sure that as an administrator of whatever system you choose, that you're getting some sort of 360-degree view of what's going on. So for instance, it would be nice if you'd be able to print out a log that says, oh, this study was shared then, this study was viewed, it was downloaded, and to just create an audit trail of all the activity that's been going on. So you know what's happening within the system and with the data that's being hosted in the system.
Very helpful, and that makes a lot of sense. So how can practices specifically benefit from this software and the delivery models?
Absolutely. So this technology can impact everyone across the care continuum. If you think about everyone that on this call that you interact with, patients, other doctors, and also the administrators, whether it's an IT admin or whether it's a practice administrator. So it can really address all parts of the workflow chain for all of these different types of users. Just to further elaborate, let me talk about a few specific examples here. So the first is to streamline care. It can help when you have this agile way of being able to access information and have it at your fingertips when and where you need it. This ultimately can help to minimize unnecessary and duplicate radiation procedures, which often result when you just don't have access to the information. So this becomes an issue if you've received an imaging study on a disc and you can't read it, or if it got lost in translation. So the real-time information sharing is really helpful here. Another way this is helpful in a clinical setting is by improving interoperability. So for you as a private practice or an independent practice, you need to be able to connect with other doctors. You need a nice framework to be able to share information with patients by providing them with a portal to access their information. And just the other facilities you work with, maybe you have privileges at a hospital, being able to share information and have access to the tools when you need it. So we kind of talked about this briefly, but it can certainly reduce cost, especially in terms of archiving and especially in terms of the image sharing component, or reducing the cost of courier service to share studies in the mail. It can save time. We talked about how you can share a study within 5 minutes. And growing your network. This is an important concept. Having an online information sharing portal, having access to imaging online, allows you to reach out to other facilities. It opens up communication lines in the sense where you can send them a link, they can upload patient information over to you, and it's just much more seamless. So those are a few ideas that I wanted to point out just to get people's wheels turning.
Very nice. This is really good information. Can you give us a few case studies or examples of practices that have used the cloud technology?
Definitely. So a few practices that I'm working with, I have them listed out on this slide here. One is women's health. So I've been working with a multi-site women's health practice to cut archiving costs for long-term storage of mammography. And they've also done something really cool where they're able to provide their patients with online access to all of their studies. So the patient can just go create an account and then sign into the practice to view all of their studies, view all of the reports associated with their studies. So it's a very great use case. Another one here is an orthopedic surgeon. He's a solo orthosurgeon, and he uses a mobile viewing application to remotely access exams. So in the past, if he got a call from someone and he needed to look at an exam and it was after hours, he'd have to drive back to his clinic just to be able to log into his system to pull up the studies. And now he's able to do that from the comfort of his own home. He has privileges at a hospital, so he can go into the OR and he brings his iPad with him. He's able to zoom into the studies, scroll through the series, and have access to everything right then and there. Another interesting example is a neurological institute who is building out, they're a world-renowned neurological institute, and they've been building out a virtual second opinion program. And what's different about them is they've included a web sharing portal for imaging. And so essentially patients from all around the world can submit their imaging work as part of their second opinion request through the web, which makes, of course, things so much easier than sending exams on CDs, and really streamlines that process. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, just another quick example here. There's a radiology practice that's improving efficiency around remote reads. So they're using this, a cloud solution for telemedicine, specifically telestroke use cases. So just some food for thought on how these systems are currently being used in small, mid-sized practices.
Great examples, and very, very helpful to hear. So any parting thoughts or summary?
Yes, I just want to leave everyone with a few parting thoughts. If we've piqued your interest and you want to start considering what options are out there as you navigate the vendor landscape, just a few things to think about and really things to ask potential cloud vendors. Just a cheat sheet here is the first question you probably want to ask is how often is the solution updated? We talked about the service aspect of it and how often new features are being rolled out. It's a reasonable time frame for new features to be launched on a quarterly basis. Once a month is great. Also in terms of upgrades, when these upgrades happen and they're automatically rolled out, are they included? Usually most providers will include them, but you want to make sure you're not getting nickeled and dimed there. Another question to ask is for customization. So first, can customizations happen within the platform? We talked about having the ability to create granular roles to control access to who has access to the system. So that's an example of a customization. Setting up customizations to build out workflows around image sharing and storage. You want to be able to do that with with few intervention. You want to be able to do that on your own. And if you do need to consult with the vendor, do they have 24/7 support? Are they going to be able to get back to you in a reasonable time frame? It's also helpful sometimes, depending on your use case, if the vendor has an open API. Maybe if you are trying to embed imaging with your EMR, an API just helps for developing software and building out connections between different types of software. And then lastly, this one seems kind of obvious, but I think it's always important just to mention, and that's, is the vendor experienced? Who are you dealing with? Sometimes you'll be really excited about the software, but then you'll learn that it's completely outsourced. So if it's important to you to make sure that the vendor is providing solutions that are built in-house, just make sure you know what their model looks like. Can you trust them? Are you looking forward to working with their services team? Because as we talked about, it's not just about the software, it's about the service and the people that you'll be working with to deliver the software and make image management a reality for your practice. So those are just a few parting thoughts. And Shirley, do you have any other questions or anything else that you wanted to mention that we didn't cover?
Well, this was a lot of information, a lot of acronyms, a lot of good information, and I know that speaking for me, I didn't understand every single thing you said, but what came clear is how important this topic is and how helpful it would be to our individual practices.
Yeah.
So if one of our listeners or some of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what is your contact information?
Oh, yes.
Is it on the next slide? There we go. Okay.
There we go.
D like David, T like Thomas, EE at DICOMgrid.com. You're also on LinkedIn, and your website is DICOMgrid.com. And we'd also encourage you to go to naimp.org and view the slides and also the other webinars and presentations that we have for you every week. So Dana, thank you so much. This was just packed with good information, and we appreciate your expertise.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. And listeners, we will talk to you again soon. Thank you.